Oh, and then at some point in my life, I gave a man a $250,000. So that was another mistake that I should have known.
My spegler way, I shop på sig. Gabusi case, I shop på sig. De petit three, I shop på sig. Den tænker rig, I shop på sig. My spegler way, I shop på sig. Gabusi case, I shop på sig.
That's so weird. I started my chewing gum. Okay, Sanibonani Ninjani, welcome to another episode of Digital Dyans. I'm here as usual with
Shabulela Mawisa,
and I am Wasanga Man. And today we are joined by the lovely, the vivacious, the gorgeous Nicolette Mashile. How are you, Sissy? Thank you for joining us.
Hi guys, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Except I can't see Sanele. I must just say, I can see all of your Sanele is like sitting like social distancing.
Yeah, there we go. We'll try.
Okay, well, now you can't see me.
Okay,
okay.
Perfect.
All right.
You can see all of them.
So I think everyone is going through a pretty tough time. It's just they talk about a new norm for everyone, and financial literacy is one of those things. And the knowledge about and around financial literacy, as much as we do a lot of things online, people are shopping, and we just need to be a bit more savvy. So from your idea and life point of view, we've been watching you, and it's quite impressive the way that you're doing things. And just before we begin, if you are joining in, please do subscribe, do the things, like, also ask your fans to do the things. But the first question that I'd like to ask you, Nicolette, have you always been interested in finance?
No, no, not at all. In fact, I still don't like finance very much. I just think the idea of having to deal with numbers on a daily basis is quite onerous, man. It makes people feel really intimidated. So one thing that I learned very quickly, and I think it's probably after I made quite a lot of financial mistakes, was that you got to understand money. You don't need to understand finance. You need to understand money. So there's a huge difference for me in understanding finance and understanding money, right? Money is an everyday thing that we use. You know, the fact that you and I and everybody in the room is able to have this conversation now is enabled in some way by money. So I think if a lot of us understood money a little bit better, finance is for those people that want to build enterprises and want to make lots and huge amounts of money. But I think more than anything, it's almost similar to you either play soccer or football, whatever you want to call it, or you are a supporter and a fan of football, right? So if you're a fan of football, you understand football. You can even tell the coach what to do, what formation to play, but you don't necessarily have to play it. So I think that's probably the very big difference. So no, my answer is always no. That's probably why I come with all the fluff around finance and irritate the people that really studied finance, because I want to put lipstick on a pig and they just like, listen, we studied this shit. We know what we're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not that hard though. So I think that's really where I am.
Yeah, I like how you bring it close to the layman, because it's almost some mysterious league of finance, because we all mess up. And I like the fact that you also mentioned the mistakes. How did you learn from those mistakes, and how can we learn and take it seriously? Because it's perpetual. When is that time where you're like, you know what, every last week is the same situation? When did that happen for you? When was it like? How do we structure that?
Yeah, I lost 125,000 Rand because I had to settle out of court. And this was because I tried to buy a house and I didn't know that the offer to purchase was a legally binding document. So there I was signing it thinking, oh, I'm in. I'm about to live in this big mansion. And then the next day I called my bank and I said to my bank, I'm going to need 4 million Rand. And they were like, no, leave that one. That one is not for you. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, shut, no problem. Went back to the real estate agent, said, listen, I can't buy this house anymore. And she was like, my dear, that's not how it works. We need all the banks to come back to you. and say that they cannot give you the 4 million rand. Well, I mean, I needed only 2 point something million. I was going to put the other as a deposit. So yeah, and then I had to settle out of court because they were they were raising a court, whatever it's called in English, because of loss of potential income when they took the house off the market. I mean, they took the house off the market for literally 2 or 3 days, but whatever. And I realized after that it wasn't necessarily only just the lack of knowing financial stuff, right? I didn't have any reference in my house. My dad and my mom built their own house. My sister bought a house with a boyfriend. We'll talk about that on another day. So technically, there was no one person in my life that I could go to and say, okay, so the lack of reference, the lack of education, but also a very hierarchical relationship between us Black people and the financial sector. Because to be quite honest, that was a silly case. I could have won that case had I just pursued it. But the reality is that I don't want to be in trouble. They coming with their big lawyers. They coming up with these big words. I know nothing about finance. And that's when I realized, here, you need to start understanding finances or money for you to be able to actually survive, because we use money on a daily basis. Oh, and then at some point in my life, I gave a man a $250,000 rand. So that was another mistake that I should have known.
Yeah.
So I've come to the realization that I actually make financial mistakes every day, despite knowing better. And I think that's life, man. I mean, how many times do you ask out the girl that is, way above where you are, or you are making a mistake at work, or we make mistakes on a daily basis, despite knowing better. That's part of life. I just think it's different to make a mistake when you didn't know, but when you do know, that's when you need to call yourself towards yourself and be like, man, Jana, let's sit down and have a conversation, So yeah.
You've been able to do that with and thank you for being so open with such things. I think that's what resonates with a lot of people, because how have you actually been able to leverage your social media to assist with a lot of your aspirations? Because it's resonated, you can talk, but when it resonates with people, the growth is organic, and you really have been able to do that. How have you been able to do that?
Shoo, that's actually that's a real question. I think one of the things that I did was I studied advertising. So I think that really came into play quite a lot of times in my life when I made certain decisions about how I run my business, right? One of the things was universal truths. We did a course on universal truths when we were still, I think maybe I was in second or third year. And the universal truths are things that we all believe in. So peace, love, all those trusts, things that we believe in. And I think I played on those things. I was like, you know what? The first thing we all do, or a majority of us, when we wake up, the first thing we do is we go on social media. Now, instead of getting a social media, a pseudo social media, how about we give people the truth? How about we tell people the facts? The reality is that at the end of the day, people will generally resonate with something when it's a truth that they can actually see themselves in. I think I realized that it was working when one day this young lady sent me a message and she's like, yo, every time I think of doing something, I hear your voice in my ear. And I was like, yeah, that's it. That's what I want, And in as much as I probably could have branded myself very differently also on social media, most people were saying, I'm like the friend they've got, like sitting with them in a taxi. Somebody also will say, you're like the friend that's sitting with me in the office. So it was very important for me to be everybody's person and not necessarily one specific target audience. So, I've luckily, and I think it's a very big, I come from a village, guys. Okay, listen. Bushwick is not as sophisticated as it should be, right? So coming from a village and then going to Rhodes University, failing my degree, that was a very big lesson. And then coming to Johannesburg and then making quite a lot of money and very quickly. I mean, my first business was making 10 million rand a year. And it was like, what the hell? You know, I'd never seen such amounts of money in my life. But because I came from a village, it was very helpful because I knew nothing. So there was no spending. There was no wanting things. I didn't even know how to travel outside of South Africa. I mean, geez. So, you know, so that really helped me kind of different aspects of socio-economic lives, if I may explain it like that. So I didn't grow up poor, and I must put that out there. So when people talk about candles and all that, I'm just like, listen, I know what y'all talking about. You know, I was like, what? You talk about not eating meat. I was like, what? You know, but in Bushbuckridge standards, I was not rich either. I mean, I went to Rhodes and found out that I was actually poor, you know, and it was like, what? Geez, I actually come from a poor family. But in my Bushbuckridge standards, we were not poor, you know? So I think I have lived different types of socioeconomic lives that I'm able to kind of dabble into the people that think they're rich, the people that are rich, the people that are just middle class, and people that are just living and maybe not really the poorest of the poor. So I think that's how I've managed to use social media. The one thing you will definitely notice that I don't like doing is I don't like pretending to be something I'm not. Like, as in, if we're winning, we're winning. You know, that's really who I am. You know, and I think I have taken a cost. I must be honest. I have taken a cost in my life, and the biggest cost I've taken is to blast open my life for people to see. You know, so. It is a bit of a difficulty. It does come with its own complications. You know, my parents worry about my safety. I worry about my privacy and all those things. So it's always every day, every time I want to say something, I'm always having to battle whether this is something that I can put out into the public domain or not. So I think that's been the real cost. And of course, a whole lot of other costs that we'll talk about a little bit later.
I'm so glad that you've actually you've been mentioning these massive numbers that you speak of. It's just that I just want to know, especially when it comes to like our Black culture, there's this like pervasive behavior of people that live outside of their means, and like they consume things that they really do not have the power to pay for. At the end of the day, do you like? What are your thoughts on how we can curb that type of thinking and not park your Ferrari? We're going through a bag or whatever. Like, how do we stop that kind of spending behavior?
Conspicuous consumption.
Consumption.
Want that word?
Yo, you know what? I think a lot of South Africans, especially due to our very unfortunate past, we have a crisis of identity, right? So a lot of us think that what we have and material things are what people are going to identify us as, and then also respect us because we've got those certain things. So I do think we've got a very big and a major identity crisis. And I think once we can get many people to understand in this country that material things don't necessarily determine who you are, where you're going to end up, we will win. It's never going to be, you know, I always preach this. I mean, sometimes I take it a bit far, but I'm only talking about how you got to be more of a producer than a consumer. You got to produce more. Don't eat less pie, eat more, bake more pie. And the reality is that a lot of these things that we say are theory, right? When you're now dealing with an actual human being, you know, in what weight or exercise or whatever it's called, they always talk about it's 90% what you eat and 10% the gym, right? I think it's also kind of similar when it comes to personal finance and how you identify as a person. I think it's 90% behavior and really 10% financial education and understanding all these things. I mean, financial education is not going to save you from who you are, you know? So if you are lacking, it doesn't matter how much money you make. If you are lacking in your identity as a human being, you will always justify buying the material things, wanting these material things, because they feed a certain part of you that nobody can recognize other than just you. So if you have a need to feed your, I mean, I bought a car this year, a week ago, in fact, and I've wanted that car since 2015. And to be quite honest, I could have bought it in 2015, but I had to sit with my ego and ask this question, who am I buying the car for? Am I buying it for myself, or am I buying it for other people to see me a specific specific way, So I think it's also really important to ask yourself, when you're doing certain things, who are you doing this for? What actually matters for you, most importantly? And at the end of the day, Black kids have to deal, white kids, and I say this with a pinch of salt and with quite the utmost respect for some white people. I mean, I don't respect all white people, let's not pretend. So I'm always like, Black kids are dealing with needs, wants, and aspirations, right? Whereas many other kids who come from different socioeconomic backgrounds only have to deal with needs and wants. We've got to deal with your needs, then your wants, and then your aspirations also. Because the reality is, you do aspire to get out of Elokshini. You do aspire to drive a certain car. Yes, it might not be a need, it might not necessarily be a want, but it's an aspiration that could potentially get you into a different band of life, of quality of life. So I think it's really also important sometimes that when we look at people who have this instant gratification of wanting specific things, we've got to look at them with the eye of saying, what is this person trying to communicate to the world? Are they trying to communicate that they're important, or are they trying to communicate their aspirations? That yes, we as personal finance people say, but if you can't afford it, don't buy it. I mean, who said if you can't afford 2 or 3 of them, you shouldn't buy one? I mean, what a stupid analogy. Like, I mean, it doesn't make sense. Must I go buy 3 Range Rovers? Like, does that make any sense to anybody? And if I had money to buy 3 Range Rovers, why am I buying it on credit? That's stupid, like, honestly speaking. So we've got to ask, is it an aspiration of a person to want to drive a certain car, so that we can actually understand where it is that people are? And I think a lot of South Africans are often, we're hard on ourselves. Nobody's born being good at money, guys. Sometimes because really it is what it is, because there's so many things that sometimes do go against you. And I think that's the one way we can also look at the narrative. But also very important to remember, there's a thing called lifestyle inflation. Any lifestyle inflation is omnisa. It's straight up. That is just the way it is. All right. Your life is going to change, and it is better to embrace the change. It is better to embrace that you no longer drink coffee and you drink Jacobs now, because this is the person you're trying to be. It's okay. It's long as you can afford Leo Jacobs, it's okay. And I think it's important. But what you should not do is to allow lifestyle inflation to be dictated by other people. Other people should not be the reason you say, I only drink Valpre water now and no longer tap water. Should be because you can come up with whatever silly reason as to why you must drink Valpre water. So I always think it's important as a person to identify what are your pressure points, what is putting you under pressure to spend a certain way, to consume a certain way, and to behave a certain way.
Yes, thanks once again, Nicolette, for all those wonderful insights. And I mean, like, just while we're here and talking about needs, wants, and aspirations, what do you think if you think there is a correlation between education and success, like, getting the education that you need and building success of that? Or do you think that it is perfectly just as easy to do so without education? Or do you think there's a correlation between the two?
Look, I think there's a correlation between education and success, but I think we need to stop trying to classify education in one way. We've majorly institutionalized education. We've always made this assumption that education needs to come from certain institutions. It doesn't. Education is around us all the time. When what was that saying? When the student is ready, the teacher will emerge, or something like that. And I was actually in the bathtub last night, and I was thinking about that saying, and I was like, what does that saying actually mean? And my interpretation of it is that when you are ready to learn, you're going to find education and the teacher in every single form in life. You can literally take any type of analogy and you can apply to whatever it is that you're trying to learn, as long as you understand what it is that you're trying to achieve at the end of the day. So I despise the idea that education is very formal and needs to come from institutions and it's the only path to success. It's definitely not the only path to success. In actual fact, if you look at a lot of successful people, you will find that there is something to learn from them, whether you like it or not. So technically, it's you either learn first, or you either do first and then you learn afterwards, or you can learn first and then do. My worry with people that learn first and then do is that then they've got this security issue. Then they've got a risk. They're very risk averse. You know, people that didn't go to school, we're breaking down these doors. So I think it's also important to remember that sometimes education in itself can become a barrier because people use it to be elitist. And if you're going to use education to be elitist, it means that you're not going to actually see what's happening around you in the world because you are trying to appeal to a certain group of people and not to everybody. So I think it's very important as a person to understand the correlation between education is that it's not necessarily formal education, it's pure learning. It's really when we talk about a child needs to learn how to talk. No kid at the age of 9 months is sent to a school and say, go learn how to walk, go learn how to crawl. Kids do it because they start to mimic what they see around them. And that in itself is learning. So I think yes, there is a correlation, but perhaps we need to change the narrative around what is learning, what is education, and where can one source that education.
Thank you. Yeah. Cool. So you mentioned earlier your background in advertising. All three of us are in it or have been in it. And I find it quite interesting how, the various things that you learn in that particular field, have you used any insights or incorporated any of that into your businesses and how you operate?
Oh, definitely. Oh my goodness. Yes. Funny enough, I'm actually doing my MBA and my research question is on what factors impact or influence a consumer's buying of or purchasing of financial products and services, right? And essentially it's to try and understand where lies the actual influence, not the influence that we all want to quantify. And I think advertising for a very long time has always tried to quantify certain things, the way we do certain things, how we do them, and why people do them. But I want to understand for me where lies the actual influence. If you, as Usanele, as Siya, as Uwasanga, is going to be buying a TFSA, for instance, where did the influence actually come from? What about you makes you want to go and get yourself a tax-free savings account? We've come to realize that it's not the education, because let me tell you, there are many clients of mine who don't understand their products, but they've got them, so it can't be education, right? Most of the time it's word of mouth, it's fear, because people buy financial products simply because they don't want to not have them. So that's what I'm trying to understand. And I think if I can really pin that down and get a better understanding of that, it will actually make my advertising journey a little bit better, because at some point I would like to get back into advertising. We need to change the landscape of South Africa's advertising also. I mean, honestly speaking, we cannot no longer be dancing for shirts as not when we are the majority in this country. It is unnecessary, So, and we can't have white people copywriting isiZulu. It just doesn't work, But we also, my mentor taught me something. He said to me, so he is the CEO of private property, and he said to me, Nicolette, when I went into private property, the whole board was white, lily white. And instead of doing the Viva thing and trying to fight the system, I learned and I adapted myself to the whiteness. And through that, I then started to infiltrate. I think a lot of us in South Africa, what we do, even in the finance sector, in the finance, personal finance education, a lot of us want to come in and change everything all of a sudden. We want to fight with the banks. Oh my gosh, the banks are terrible. Oh my God, blah, 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 whatever. The reality is that you need to understand the system. If you don't understand the system, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how much Viva-ring you can do. You can Viva all you want. The people that own the system will always use it to empower themselves. Because if you look at it, I was looking, let me just take it a bit, guys, you all know I can talk, right? So you only tell me to keep quiet when it's time for me to shh. So let me tell you, I came in with a Viva mentality when I started. I went to Treasury and I was like, guys, Treasury, FSCA, I was like, it's unethical to sell Black people products. They don't understand. I don't care. And they took out the FACE Act and they were like, madam, these people have a record of advice. They've been advised, they've been explained to. Therefore, they actually we're allowed to sell them. It is legal. And I was like, okay, law, because they understand the system. Do you understand? So now when you go inside, you got to go in there and understand what the system says. So if we're going to be using any type of matrix in advertising, in law, in whatever philosophy, anthropology, whatever area of business that we're talking about, it is very important for all of us to understand what is the real true influence of anything. But to add on as to whether I'm using advertising, oh my God, listen, my client was Sandra. I learned a lot, okay? The one thing I learned was to take the punches. And let me tell you, I've been taking the punches. I had to fix my teeth. Can you see my teeth? As Wasanga would know, my teeth are much straighter now. Because somebody on YouTube said to me, wow, Sisi, and I was like, oh, you know, so I've learned to take punches because when we launched eTolls, yes, we got every single person in this country literally swearing at us. What else did I use? I use my advertising also so I started with Facebook, right? I did a bit of Facebook, used Facebook ads to push out my content. And then I took Facebook, I grew the audience on Facebook, and then I migrated them to YouTube. So my YouTube grew fast. And people were like, how did you? And I'm like, no, don't worry. And I was like, no, it wasn't that clever, guys. It was literally moving people from one to another. And I was like, nah. See, I'm not going to walk around telling people I'm now the maverick of YouTube and I know how to build audiences on YouTube, because that's a lie. One thing that I must also add on there, I am very lucky. And people always downplay luck. And let me tell you why people downplay luck. People will downplay luck because luck it feels like if you say somebody is lucky, you are overlooking their efforts. And the fact is, luck comes to play very much, and most of the time. I always say I'm a lucky person when it comes to money. I'm always finding myself in the right place at the right time. I mean, if I can give you a couple of examples, sometime my bosses, when I was still in advertising, they say to me, we need a BEE. What BEE? What? When you gotta have a BEE, what? And they were like, we have to give you money. And I was like, what? For free? And they were like, yeah. I was like, oh shit. That's cool, And then at some point when I left my job, I was sitting in a meeting. I remember sitting in a meeting between Standard Bank and Liberty. And I went to the head of financial education at Liberty at that time. And I said to her, listen, I've got a TV show I want you to give me money for. And she was like, yo, I'd love to give you money, but I don't have capacity within my team. And I was like, hello, meet Nicolette. My name is Capacity. And she was like, okay, Cho, come through Monday. Went into her, guys, she matched my advertising salary when I left. I knew nothing about finance. All I knew was that I was ready to be in this. So I think people downplay luck, because if you have to explain things by saying people are lucky, you almost undermining their efforts and everything they've done. Yes, you've got to be ready at all times. But the reality is, how are you going to say to somebody that is not doing well that they were not ready? I don't think that's fair, because a lot of us try, a lot of us do put in the effort, but most people don't get the same type of output, So I do think that luck plays a really big role in some of the things that we do. And hopefully one day I'd like to see a lot more people talk about it. I know I didn't answer your question fully, but you know what? It's
fine. There's still nuggets. There's still nuggets there.
We almost are out of time. And you are Mzansi's financial bunny. And you just put a book out recently. So what can we plan to see from Nicolette moving forward, like in the next year or so?
Okay, so I'm very well planned, by the way. You planning okay. So I've got a game also. It's called Save or Spend. It's a board game. We've also digitized it, so you can get it on iOS and on Android. So I've got a new WhatsApp line. Like how what's a bot? What's it called? What's a bot? You know how World Health Organization is that WhatsApp bot where you something like that, so we can answer your financial questions. We've got the Financial Bunny Gym is launching on the 8th of August, same day as we launch the book. The Financial Bunny Gym basically is a wellness center, financial wellness center, but it's conceived around the idea, or conceptualized around the idea of a fitness center. So you can come and box away your debts. You can come and run a mile for your wealth, whatever. I mean, the more creative people will explain that a bit better. But we got everything. We got a bar, we've got popcorn, we've got coffee, we've got internet, we've got movies. So you can, if you feel like your finances are sitting heavy on your shoulders, come to our gym, come and chill with us. Because it's on azipeli la. So I got a whole lot of that. And yeah, man, I think what else is coming through? Oh, we are turning the YouTube channel into a television channel. So currently speaking to some production company there in the other countries across the African continent to give us different types of content. So on a Monday, you'll have a different episode. Tuesday, you'll have something else. Wednesday. So you'll kind of stop seeing a lot of me and start seeing other people. So that's basically what we're doing, kind of putting out some on-demand stuff also on the YouTube channel.
Awesome.
In the book itself, I'm really interested. What can we, without giving away too much, what's in the blend?
Yay! So I wrote a financial but non-financial book, something like that. So let me tell you actually what happened. So I started writing this book in 2018. Started writing the book, had a ghostwriter. I was narrating on a little recorder, would send through my shit, and she would write, right, or transcribe. And then I was done with the book by last year, August. And I was ready. I was like, yes. I had a whole lot of book deal people who are trying to scam me. I mean, really, geez, you guys must read this book deal. It's so stupid. Guys, you write the whole book and then they want to come and own it. It does not make sense. I was like, I'm sorry, how much are you actually putting into my book that you guys want to own it? Because I feel like I can pay you that money up front and then my book belongs to me. You just do your job. So I wrote the book, and then August last year, I was fortunate enough to be hired by Airports Company South Africa. And I went to all their airports across South Africa. And as I was sitting and doing these workshops with their employees, I realized that, you know what? People don't need to be told about all these fancy financial things. They can Google their shit. People want to understand real life. They want to talk about real life. And luckily for me, just before August, there's another lady who does personal finance. Her name is Mapalo Maku, and she wrote a book called "You Are Not Broke, You Are Pre-Rich." I went to buy her book. I paged through her book, and I was like, she wrote the book I wrote. So I was like, good shot. Scrapped the whole thing. Last year, August, restarted the book. So now the book is just full of simple, ordinary lessons. You know, there's a chapter on how much I hate my house. What a terrible buy, guys. Oh, my goodness. I bought on stays, spiral stays. I mean, what stupidity is that? How I got arrested. So a financial lesson from a jail cell. My sister's lobola is also a chapter in there. Of course, there's a chapter on how I gave boys money. So I think it's literally my life, and it's stories about my life, but they've got some sort of financial lessons attached to it. Yeah.
I think I speak for all of us here that that we are looking forward to everything that you have to offer us coming forward. And I'd like to thank you again so much for coming through and speaking to the digital giants. I don't know if you guys have anything to say.
No, that's it. Thank you so much. All the best for the future. Keep us in mind when you are in those billboards. Yeah?
In those boardrooms.
In those boardrooms.
Yeah. You guys are the ones in advertising. You better keep me in mind.
Yeah. Definitely will.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much to everyone for listening. Thank you for listening once again. Subscribe and do follow us, and also her on her channel. Cheers.
Yeah.
Link in the...
Oh, the links.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
Ityana catchy man, ehlazindo yevuba ityana catchy. Ityana catchy man, savu catchy lazixoxo zongayiphote. Ityana catchy man, stoka lenda hleli phansi ngeshot ingayo nguwe kodwa ugalela ishot uphula umthetho and you always a lot. Oh yeah, I'm fetty catching, sacaphukile tyisile iti. Intloni ziyamakha umntu ngcono uthembele ityi zama umbekela bucala umntu yefike bese